Hey, hello. It's February. Christina, happy February.
Happy February. It's a great month.
It's a great month. It's almost your birthday, or it is your birthday?
No, my birthday's Thursday.
Okay, but it's close.
Close.
Right. So February, we have an amazing salon for you tonight. It's super exciting. We're going to do something a little bit different. First of all, you guys should be putting your names and where you're from out in the comments so that we can say hi to you in a second. But we're going to introduce our authors first, and then we're going to do sponsors. It's going to be all crazy, so stick with us. Let's start with the authors. Christina?
Okay, we have 4 authors tonight. Our first author is Wiley Wei Chun Ho. She's an award-winning author of short stories and personal essays, and she's working on her first novel. Our second reader is Sarah Kain Gutowski. If you actually came to our salons when they were in person, you know her because she used to come and read for us there. She's the author of The Familiar and Fabulous Beast poems, which was a runner-up for the 2018 X.J. Kennedy Prize, a 2019 Forward Indies finalist, and a winner of the 14th Annual National Indies Excellent Award for Poetry.
Deserved.
Our third author is Shelley Blanton-Stroud. She's the author of the Jane Benjamin novels, Copy Boy, Tomboy, and Poster Girl. Her writing has been a finalist in the Sarton Book Awards, IBPA Benjamin Franklin Awards, Killer Nashville's Silver Falchion Award, and the American Fiction Awards.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone, welcome Shelley.
Yeah, Shelley.
And finally, we have Lisa Bird Wilson. She is a Saskatchewan, Métis, and Cree writer. Her most recent book, Probably Ruby, is published internationally and was a finalist for the Governor General's Literary Award and shortlisted for the Amazon First Novel Award and won 2 Saskatchewan Book Awards, including Book of the Year.
We're awesome. You're awesome. And now I can introduce what we are. So this is, you have found the Pen Parentis Literary Salons. We are a monthly reading series that celebrates the unbelievably spectacular work of writers who are also parents. So all these people happen to have children. What do you know? And yet they are super geniuses and very edgy and cool. Do tell us that you're here. We don't know that you're here unless you put your name and where you're from in the comments. You don't have to put your name if you don't want to, but we'd love to know where you're watching from. Also, if you're watching us on playback, hi. We're glad you're here. I do want to thank our sponsors because they are amazing and because we couldn't be here without them. So the DeGroat Foundation, we want to thank you. The New York Council on the Arts, NYSCA, thank you very much for your support. NYSCA doubled their support of us this year. And
we love them.
I mean, wow. And also newly, we are supported by Poets and Writers, funds from the DCLA, which is the New York City's Department of Cultural Affairs. So we love it. We are very fancy now, but that we still need you. And some of the people that donated as they were coming in, thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you, Cynthia Marie. We appreciate you so much. It was really nice of you to donate on your way in. And hey, I see Helene and June, and I'm so glad. And Drew from Sydney. We have an Australian who comes every time. Just saying. We're so cool. And Baltimore, hi, Kathleen. Thanks for coming. You see, so that's how it works. You are able to chat in your questions. You are able to chat in your comments. You can do the little emoji thingy-dees, the hearts and stuff, and they go rising up the screen. It's very cool. So yeah, that is the story. Do I have anything? Oh, I do have a short little announcement that I want to congratulate Dr. Melody Glenn, whose first book, The Mother of Methadone, comes out this July from Beacon Press, and also to Betsy Golden Kellum, whose first book, Jumping Through Hoops, Performing Gender in the I can't read my own handwriting, in the 19th Century Circus. It is Performing Gender in the 19th Century Circus. The book is called Jumping Through Hoops, and it is forthcoming in August from Feminist Press. We are particularly proud of them because both of these authors wrote their books and got their agents and made their splash while in Pen Parentis accountability group. So we're very proud of that program. If you are a writer and a parent, it doesn't matter what age your kids are, and it doesn't matter what stage your writing is in. If you are a writer and a parent, you are very welcome to join us as a member, and then you get to be in an accountability group, which is a little group like this, a little Zoom, and you every week set goals, and we hold you accountable. That's pretty much it. And also, lastly, it is February, so that means March 1st is the opening of the Pen Parentis fellowship, writing fellowship for new parents. So if you have a child under 10 years old, you can also have children older than 10 years old, you consider applying. All the guidelines are on the website. We made the word count so short this year that anybody can do it. It is so short, but you still have to write your best writing because, as you know, it's harder to write short than it is to write long. So be super geniuses, but we're not giving you very many words. So it's not gonna hurt you. It's gonna be good for you. You're gonna feel the creativity. It's gonna be awesome. And yeah. And I love that. Look, Sarah knows some of these people. Sarah, who do you know down there? You're like saying hi to people in chat, but who do you know?
Val and Jen are two of my students this semester. And
oh, yay, students! Hi, Sto! That's awesome.
Creative
I love
writers.
it. That's awesome. Any up and coming creative writers, we are super happy to have you here. Sandel! Oh my God!
Yeah, oh my God! Hi.
Sandel is great. She funded the Sandel Morris Author Ambassador Fund, which helps us keep a person from our community on our board. And so that's a very cool, special thing too. Okay, let's go, my loves. Let's do some readings. Ready? Let's do this.
So we have authors choose what salons they'd like to do, and all these people here chose this salon, which focuses on the existential crisis. So let's see what they have to read, and let's see what we will discuss afterwards. So, like I said, our first reader is Wiley Wei Chun Ho. She's an award-winning author of short stories and personal essays. She's working on her first novel. Much of her work has been published in River Teeth, Room, Prism International, Rice Paper, WordWorks, Better Next Year, and Chrysanthemum, Voices of the Taiwanese Diaspora. Her first book-length manuscript, The Feral Children of Dunbar Street, explores the complexities of growing up in a transnationally separated astronaut family, where the parents and children live overseas from each other.
Did you coin that phrase, or is that already a phrase? Astronaut children.
That was coined by the anthropologist Iowa Ong.
It's such a cool phrase.
So great.
Really
it's so
like
great.
It. Yeah.
So evocative, right?
Yeah.
So this manuscript was first runner-up for the 2021 Jim Wong Chiu Emerging Writers Award. Everyone, please welcome Wiley Wei Chun Ho.
Yay!
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the great long bio, which I feel like some days should be just reduced to writer when only doesn't bug her too much. So I'm going to read an excerpt that hits on the very theme of existential crisis. It's, I think, going to be familiar to anyone who's tried to visit their childhood home, which is to say an almost impossible destination. Okay. These days, Taipei International is a marvel of glass and steel. Bilingual signage to welcome the English-speaking world. This helps me since my literacy in Chinese is arrested at my own name and a few simple characters like Da, Zhong, Xiao. Large, small, medium, small. An easy way to order food, an easy way to order the family. I am the last born and therefore Xiao. The one who by custom or tradition requires protection, belittling, rescue. Outside the thin skin of the 787 Dreamliner that has delivered me 10,000 kilometers to my birthplace, the air is moist and subtropical. My skin is the first to recognize its first home. A 45-minute cab ride takes me to my hometown. Its immutable smells embedded in my synapses. hot rain on cracked pavement, stinky tofu and spicy cabbage, pineapples ripening in the sun, fumes from two-stroke engines. But wait, was that an electric moped that just whirred past? My mind reluctantly succumbs to reality. I pass the local temple, its red doors open and facing an outdoor stage. The clanging cymbals and high-pitched opera from my childhood have silenced. Young people don't appreciate good music, laments an old-timer, fanning himself with a rolled newspaper. Each time I come, the elders get frailer, fewer. I imagine Agong and Apo here enjoying opera with their friends, their bodies straight, strong arms holding squirming grandkids. But the silence now insists otherwise. My grandparents' absence hangs in the air like the incense smoke from the temple, mingling with the smog that now cloaks this town. The nearby mountains and rivers have shapeshifted too. The roaring waters, siphoned off by industry, have been tamed to a trickle. The giant hardwoods replaced by whispering bamboo. I arrive at the house where I was born, a gray 4-story building constructed of reinforced concrete. A survivor of the big one in 1999, there is but one visible crack that travels from the ground to the second floor, stopping there like a polite intruder. After nearly a century and 3 generations under the same roof, the interior is a little shabby. The grand rooms somehow miniaturized. Only the photos of my ancestors still loom large, high up on the living room wall, casting their silent judgments, making me feel like a child again. Errant, blameworthy somehow, but also cared for. In a few weeks, when it's time for me to return to my life in Canada, I will pause at the back door and hold my breath for as long as possible, feeling the blood pulse at my temples until I exhale and release, molecule by molecule, what must change with each remembrance and half forgetting. Thank you.
Wiley, that's so evocative. Wow.
That's beautiful.
That's and so true. That whole, like, you can't go home again. There was a big fat book by Tom Wolfe, right? Where you just, everything's different. Yeah. Yes. Wow. Gorgeous.
There's like a disconnect, right? Like, it's like you
Yeah,
get off the plane, everything smells the same, everything looks the same, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. And I have sisters who still live in Taiwan, and when I wax nostalgic like that, they say, it's we have a right to move on, is what they say.
Yeah. I mean,
right? We want to hold on to what we can predict because it's comforting.
Yeah.
But when new experiences come, sometimes it just does not cohere with what we.
Well, I think it also works on a micro level as well as like the city, like the whole country, right? For people who leave a place, some people it's just their childhood home. They're like, "Why'd you redo the floor?" But other people, it's like their whole country or their whole city. For me, it's my city is non-recognizable at all. Like nothing about it is the same. The 4-way stop signs are giant interpasses, like giant. And it's crazy. There are at least 4 people out in the audience who are just giving you claps. Helene, June, Sandel, they all had lovely comments for you. Thanks for responding out there, you guys. Awesome.
If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Anytime.
And we will send the message on.
For sure.
Thank you so much, Wiley. Our next reader is Sarah Kain Gutowski. She's the author of Familiar and Fabulous Beast Poems, which was a runner-up for the 2018 X.J. Kennedy Prize, a 2019 Forward Indies finalist, and winner of the 14th Annual National Indies Excellence Award for Poetry. With interdisciplinary artist Meredith Starr, she is co-creator of Every Second Feels Like Theft, a conversation in cyanotypes and poems, and It's All Too Much, a limited edition audio project. Her poetry has appeared in various print and online journals. Her criticism has been published by Colorado Review, Calyx, a journal of art and literature by women, and New York Journal of Books. She holds an MFA in poetry from NYU. Everyone, please welcome Sarah Kain Gutowski.
Can you hear June out there going, woo?
It's so nice. So my book is a narrative in poems, and it's also it's fiction. It's the extraordinary self versus the ordinary self. They're two characters that kind of fight for dominance in a single household. The extraordinary self is obsessed with ambition, and the ordinary self is the one that holds the fort down back at home. All things domestic and just, normal. And I feel like the context is necessary because I'm just going to read, I think, 2 poems from the book. And so at this point, the extraordinary self has been exiled from the house because she has created a disaster. Like everything is a mess. Everything is in disorder. No one is happy because she has ignored everything in the pursuit of her ambition. Her terror is palpable. When she can't sleep, my extraordinary self abandons her bed for the car. She listens to rain hitting the roof, watches it loop down the windshield and disappear beneath the hood. Sometimes she takes a cup of tea and stares as the liquid transforms to steam, smoke-like wraiths rising to meet her chilled face. She's haunted by ghosts, of course, has always endured their cliché, banal arrival. Always at night, always with a show of low crying, rustling sheets, banging doors, and furtive moving shadows. Often, they follow her to the car. The ghost of my extraordinary self past feels most at home in the back, playing with the seatbelt buckles and making requests for radio stations, but she's never happy with what's played. Eventually, she'll settle for an abandoned channel and its static song. The ghost of my extraordinary self present prefers the front passenger side, insists on adjusting the air vents, moves the seat back and forth, reclined, then upright. She never stays with one position for long. It's the ghost of my extraordinary self yet to come who's least companionable. She manifests in the trunk, and though my extraordinary self refuses to walk around and release the door, we know somehow this ghost is blindfolded, gagged, and trussed with rope. Her terror is palpable. She thumps her head and moans, but my extraordinary self turns up the static on the radio and wills the night to sheet the car with its wet noise. Then morning comes, or the rain pauses, and the ghosts dissolve, and she sleeps in the brief, elliptical quiet. A necessary lesson. Lest you think we're judging my extraordinary self extremely and unfairly, know that she's kind of a shit. Perpetually the kids because she can't have more quiet or more time or simply more of her way. Distraught when odds are stacked against her and small requests from the children for a glass of water, a repeated direction, or braided hair stand like roadblocks in her path to some imagined greatness. I mean, really, she's the worst. Don't waste time over her spilt ambitions, opaque as milk. They were too much for such a small glass. It's a lesson she must learn. So turn your head and pretend you don't hear when she says, "I'm sorry." Or better yet, stare her down as she avoids meeting your eyes over our boy's shoulder, whom she hugs at the bus stop, trying to dam his tears at her sleeve. "Please forgive me," she whispers, yet don't relent. Her sorrow's sincere, but like hindsight, late. The boy, your gaze, and time's critique, each should be as unrelenting, as daggers sharp and piercing, as cold as November's sleet.
That was gorgeous. I love this idea of the two competing selves. I love how you do that. That is
They're so mean
brilliant.
to each other. It's awesome and real.
It gets weirder. They try to kill each other.
So real. The realest of the real. You have lots of claps from Valerie and June and Helene.
Thank you.
Yes. It's unusual to see, well, it's recently more usual to see narrative poetry that has a whole story to it.
Yeah, more and more, I think there are poetry collections that are telling a narrative over the scope of like all the poems. And some of my favorite books have been doing that. I don't know, so I intended it at first, but it just kind of happened. You know, once I wrote one, then I started writing another, and then whoa, there's a book.
It's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I compare it to the quote experimental literature of like the 90s and around maybe even 60s. Like people would write super poetic short stories that were borderline poetry, and they just happen to be in paragraphs. But now everything is paragraphs, even poetry, so it's fine.
Right.
Whatever you want.
My friend Cynthia says it's like the prose poetry is then the gateway to essays.
Yeah, exactly. Like 15 essays later, you've written a memoir.
Yeah.
Like, okay, now it's all one. It's all one.
Yeah.
Well, it is like a lot of genres are starting to cross and connect. And so I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I think I want to talk later a lot more about the ambition and the part of you that is like wants to be unstoppable, doesn't want to stop. You know what I mean? I think that this is something we never talk about. Like women aren't supposed to be ambitious, right? And so please hold on to that thought and we will come back after. Thank you.
But wait, there's more.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Yay, Sarah.
Our next reader is Shelley Blanton-Stroud. She's the author of the Benjamin novels, Copy Boy, Tomboy, and Poster Girl. Her writing has been a finalist in the Sarton Book Awards, IBPA Benjamin Franklin Awards, Killer Nashville Silver Falchion Award, the American Fiction Awards, and the National Indie Excellence Awards. Her shorter works appear in journals such as Brevity and Cleaver. She and her husband live in Sacramento with an aging beagle and many photos of their out-of-state sons. Everyone, please welcome Shelley Blanton-Stroud.
Yay!
Thank you. Well, I'm really glad to have heard that little bit about ambition and how awkwardly it fits into life. In all honesty, my trilogy really features, it's a historical series, and it features a very unappealingly ambitious young woman who's an Okie tomato picker in Sacramento, where I live. And she commits a crime and she runs away to San Francisco to get work during the Depression. And in order to get work, she cuts off her hair and disguises herself as a boy and becomes a copy boy. And really every book is kind of about the arc of her ambition. And almost every page of all three books is about the existential crisis of how to define yourself so that there's not such a big gap between what you're doing and what it is you want. And part of it involves her being a very bad parent figure also, because it's hard to keep all of that going at once. And yet, I sat down this week to look at each of the books to see, what would be the excerpt I would read this evening. And I decided instead just to write something new, a little bit.
Oh,
so
yay!
You're getting something
What?
hot off the journal
inspired
page. Yeah, and it's shitty enough so that you'll know I'm not lying. The reason I decided to do it was the existential crisis I've been experiencing is current. It's a very, very current. And so I just relished the opportunity to come up with 3 minutes worth of what that currentness is. So I'll go ahead with that.
Let's go.
I flew home from a cross-country work trip on December 13th. Back in Sacramento that night, I got a call from hospice. My father, Poppy, was transitioning. The next morning, I drove to his Bay Area home, where family sat in a circle around his hospital bed, reading aloud, telling stories, singing. Over the next few days, my husband and I slept restlessly in the guest bedroom next door to Poppy's, sensing or imagining movement on the other side of the wall, the comings and goings of caregivers. On December 16th, I dreamed of one of Poppy's recent troubles. 2 teeth had dropped right out of his jaw into his cup. He wanted this fixed right away, of course. But when he got to his appointment, he couldn't leave his electric wheelchair. He couldn't tolerate the pain of such movement. His dentist said, "It's too late to fix this." Poppy was miserable. It was too late. A similar thing had happened 2 years before as my mother, Nani, moved nearer to death. She'd had all of her upper teeth removed to be replaced with dentures. Though her dentist took great care to make the prosthetic look beautiful, my mother sent it back. She said he should take more pride in his work. Nani died before her dentist could invent the smile she really wanted. Poppy died December 17th at 7:40 a.m. with just me and his favorite caregiver, Esmeralda, at his side. We held his hands and we told him to look up for Nani. Then, a few hours later, we began the business of death. Ambulance, mortuary, cemetery, obituary, lawyers, bankers, movers. Then we celebrated Christmas with our children and our grandchild, who seemed so much like my own son as a toddler, laughing hilariously, pulling all the Tupperware out of the cupboard, running into the sea. Together, after Christmas, we drove to Poppy's funeral on December 28th, and then we returned to the Bay Area to clean up after Poppy. All the photographs, the clippings, the artifacts, the pill bottles. That's when I finally began to feel it. After 5 years of specialists, nephrologists, cardiologists, oncologists, pulmonologists, and of course, dentists, I'd lost both my parents. I was no longer a daughter. I was still a parent, still a grandparent, but no longer a daughter. Once a dentist pulled one of my own teeth decades ago. In the weeks after, the rest of my teeth began a slow migration into the newly empty space. My tongue discovered a strange geography, both the smooth hollow where something vital was once anchored, and the subtle shifting of familiar landmarks as neighboring teeth began their gradual instinctive drift. Now, in moments of quiet, I can feel the map of my mouth slowly reshaping itself, preparing a new way to speak and to kiss and to bite. Thank you.
Wow. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Wow. Fresh and beautiful. Thank you.
You've put somebody in here. Look. I was
Oh,
just
yeah.
in that space with parents and teeth in tears here.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, very moved. Okay.
Thank you very
So,
much.
Nothing more existential than death.
Yeah. Sorry.
No,
It's Friday night.
I mean,
No.
they knew what they were getting into when they came to a salon about existentialism.
I always love it when they call it transitioning.
It's like,
Transitioning. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Shelley,
Whew.
thank you. We'll talk more
Shelley,
about this later.
we'll talk more. Okay.
Our final reader tonight is Lisa Bird Wilson. She's a Saskatchewan, I was saying this perfectly fine before, Métis and Cree writer. Her most recent book, Probably Ruby, is published internationally and was a finalist for the Governor General's Literary Award and shortlisted for the Amazon First Novel Award and won 2 Saskatchewan Book Awards, including Book of the Year. Yes. Her collection of short stories, Just Pretending, won 4 Saskatchewan Book Awards, including 2014 Book of the Year, was shortlisted for the Danuta Glee Award, and was the 2019 One Book, One Province selection. Bird Wilson's debut poetry collection, The Red Files, is inspired by family and archival sources and reflects on the legacy of the residential school system and the fragmentation of families and histories. Lisa Bird Wilson is the past prose editor for Grain magazine, as well as founding member and chair of the Saskatchewan Anscok Writers Circle, Anscok Indigenous Literary Festival. Lisa lives in Saskatoon and is the CEO of the Gabriel Dumont Institute, Canada's first Métis post-secondary education and cultural institute. Everyone, please welcome Lisa Bird Wilson.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was a lovely introduction. So I am here to read from my book called Probably Ruby. And so Ruby is the main character of this book. She is one giant existential crisis, just all in all. Ruby is Indigenous and adopted, and really spends her entire life just trying to find her identity and try to find her way home. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the first chapter where Ruby is going to a counselor. His name is Cal. She has this big crush on Cal. She's come to her 4th appointment with him, but this is her first time at Cal's home office. So she's really excited about that because she has this big crush on him. Cal has an ex-wife who's a glassblower, and she's really jealous, of course, of Cal's ex-wife, and she has sort of noticed this little piece of glass, kind of a marble thing, which you'll see come up here. So that's just the setup for it. If Cal had noticed Ruby was always the first one to call time on their sessions, he hadn't let on. Ruby spent her life being told she was chosen, but constantly needing people to prove it. With Cal, she didn't want to be confronted with the fact that this was a business relationship. She didn't want him pointing out that time was up and she had to leave. She'd rather leave of her own accord. It was like breaking up. She was always the first to call it over. As they were wrapping up, Cal asked her to fill in a questionnaire about how useful the session was and how close she felt to resolving her issue on a scale of 1 to 10. She didn't want to make Cal feel bad by giving him a low score, so she gave it an 8. But on instant reflection, she knew that was too optimistic. She definitely thought they'd made some progress, though. He invited her to his house, after all. When he turned to his filing drawer to return her file, she did something she had no idea she would do. She palmed X's glass marble. As he was turning back to face her, she grabbed her bag as if she was looking for something, dropping the marble into her bag at the same time. She pulled out her bus pass and gave Cal an award-winning smile. When she left, he gave her a hug at the front door. A bit paternal, but still physical contact. She squeezed good and tight, but not sexy tight or needy tight, just I appreciate you tight. She decided to walk. Cal lived in the east end of the city, and she was in the west. She walked down one of the city's busiest arteries, full of bars, restaurants, tire shops, love shops, you name it. The day had warmed up, and she felt light on her feet. She considered whether she should text Cal to say thanks for today's session. She thought she probably would. She was feeling so good, she decided to stop at a familiar pub. It was only 4 p.m., and the place was nearly deserted. She took a seat at the bar. She ordered a pint of beer and enjoyed the first cold swallow, anticipating the spread of warmth that would let her shoulders relax and eventually fill her with curiosity and cuteness. She fished out her phone to text Cal now before she had too many drinks. 2 things she'd learned to be careful about. 1, she always lied to her counselors about drinking. Some of them had their own hang-ups about alcohol and drugs, and she didn't want any of them confusing their issues with hers. And the second thing she'd learned was, don't drunk text, drunk email, drunk Facebook, and so on. Best to get any follow-up text to Cal out of her system now, pre-drink. But before she had a chance to do that, she sensed someone occupy the bar stool next to hers. And I'll leave it there.
Come on.
who's on that other bar stool?
Oh, pros. Oh.
Thank you so much. You know,
Dude, both out in the audience are like, come on, more.
Come on. Yeah.
I love that hug and the
Yeah,
assessment
good. It's super fun.
afterwards. Oh my God. Wonderful. So let's turn this into more of a discussion.
Yeah,
We're
let's talk
gonna-
about existentialism.
Yeah. Well, first of all, so the way we arrange salons is we have different themes, and authors, you know, who get asked to speak, they choose the theme. And these authors all quickly jumped on this theme. So they were eager to talk about and read about this. So let's start with Sarah and see what about this theme really moved you and made you eager to be here.
Yeah. Well, it's in my, like, the tagline for the book, but it's that this is like a fictionalized version of my midlife existential crisis, you know, like coming to terms with, well, and I mean, at first I called it just a temper tantrum on paper. I mean, because it was coming at a time where, like, I wasn't able to do the things that I wanted to do in my job as a professor at the community college. I was kind of being shut out there. I felt like I had been, and this was before I had my first book published, like I had been, you know, when you write poetry and you try to get your books published, you have to go through this contest circuit, and it can be very demoralizing. It's a lot of money. I mean, it's privileged in that way. Like, I had enough cash that I could send out, but then I began to think, like, so that's cash at the expense of my family. I'm just sending out with my book manuscript and trying to get it picked up. And I was thinking, so I sacrificed there. And then I was also looking around my house and going, like, okay, so my job isn't making me happy. Like, my other career as a writer isn't going anywhere. And then I'm like, I mean, we had been in the house maybe like 10 years, and it was showing the wear and tear from, like, just a family of 5. And I was like, what have I done? All of my choices have led here, and what the hell? So yeah, I could talk about, like, the way it's also still going on. It feels like I feel like I'm in the throes of midlife crisis now. But also I know that when I talk to my husband and when I talk to my peers, like my friends who are also around the same age group, like, it's also happening to men. And it happens, like, it feels like we're stuck in it for like a decade. And why is that? It used to be, you know, the cliche was like, you have an existential crisis, and the men had the existential crisis, and they went out and they bought a sports car and they got a girlfriend. And I mean, sometimes that still happens, but, like, we don't really talk about, like, the female existential crisis too much, or we haven't maybe since, like, Simone de Beauvoir. And I don't know. So
It's possible that women had them, just no one talked about them because
yeah,
they weren't supposed to have it. They were supposed to be happy.
Well, you have that shift of, like, who you are. That entire shift of who you are happens at least 3 times. Like, you know, you get your period and you're suddenly a woman. Like, in a minute, you're like, okay, deal. Here you go. And then you have a kid and you're suddenly a mom. You're often, like, you're suddenly a wife or a spouse or a part. Like, there's this. And each one of those is not just, you know, a shift, but like a huge shift in everything, because all of your own stereotypes of what that means are overlaid onto what society thinks at that moment, and then what you think in the moment, like, not child you looking and saying, oh, that's what a mom is like, but like you now, right now, going, oh, what do I do?
Yeah. And I mean, they have these, like, sea change kind of things. And if you have multiple roles and they're all experiencing a kind of big change, like, that's your psyche takes a big kick.
Yeah.
Or if you're, like, those moments when you feel stagnant, right? Like, you're not going anywhere, and it's like, it forces you to reevaluate your whole life. Like, have I been working all these years for nothing?
Yeah, that's what it felt like. And I mean, then I felt sheepish because my first book got picked up like right after that. But I mean,
Oh, it's from the low. You get high. You get high.
I mean, but at the same time, like, it didn't make my house any better. Like, that didn't get like, like, it didn't make the fact that like I still felt like a crazy person torn between all these different aspects of my life. So, it's still perpetuated, like it still feels more true. I'm glad. Like you write the book and you like hope it resonates, and like you hope it resonates with yourself and continues to, like, but maybe this one, I wish it didn't resonate quite so much.
It's so interesting because that fractured nature, that fractured nature of extraordinary self versus ordinary self. It's so easy to believe in that, but also we're not binary. Like, whatever people believe, but those things overlap and they do bump up against each other. And one thing makes it easier to do the other thing sometimes. Like if you're doing great, if you're extraordinary, if you just won a prize, it is so much easier to be like, you know what? I'm going to clean the kitchen.
Yeah.
I just won a prize. Don't even care. Hi kids, I'm making a nice cake today.
I'm out getting a drink.
Everything is good.
Wiley, what do you have to say about this?
Well, that's interesting because I feel like the most interesting things to write about, or it's the gaps, or you're talking about overlaps. I think they're actually gaps, like from one place of security or knowledge to the next, where like that very uncomfortable stage where you don't know quite where you belong. You're sort of in between places, spaces, mindsets, generations, care roles. It's just so disorienting. And I think it's that disorientation that I find so fascinating, as well as, of course, very maddening. And trying to put that to words, it's kind of helpful. It's also very difficult. So I think that's where the art is, if you can make it into something.
It's like, thank God we have writing, right?
I think it's a little bit more constructive than having an affair. Probably.
Yeah, the normal,
you can have that too.
Person runs out and has an affair. We go to our computers and start writing.
Yeah. Lisa, what are you thinking?
Yeah, this is a great conversation. I really like it. When the idea of the theme or whatever, I was in the middle. I'm still in the middle. I'm still writing my. I have a book, a memoir, and so boy, did that ever resonate with me, because that's like so much like this concept of identity and cultural reclamation, and not knowing where you came from, and finding where you came from, and the ideas before with Wiley about going home. And it's again sort of this nostalgia of for a home that you don't even remember, and your culture and your language and your land that remembers you, but you don't remember. So it's just such a, anyway, that theme really resonates with me. I think this circling this theme of identity and indigeneity and where you belong, that all of my writing circles around in some way around that theme. So it just kind of really works for me. And I also like that idea about Sarah, the ordinary and extraordinary self, and even sort of, I think it's worth exploring this idea of kind of the multiplicity and like this mirrored image, but over and over and over again. So it's kind of like many sort of these many images. And I'm just thinking about the way that for adoptees, that identity piece and that many pieces of identity. In fact, we have more than one birth certificate, and we have more than one name. And so there's just sort of, there's so much that resonates in those ideas for me. And I think that, I'm really interested in exploring that. So I really appreciate hearing your work. And then I think you mentioned something about the men get the sports car and the girlfriend. Well, that's what I did. I got a sports car and a girlfriend. So.
Nice. Well done, you. Rock star. Lisa, are you multilingual? Do you also have the language of?
I don't know. I will throw out Cree words wherever I can, because I think that it takes it's sort of a decolonizing thing. It makes it like it's okay to say our language anywhere, like it doesn't just belong, somewhere else.
For sure.
But I am not fluent whatsoever. No.
Oh, fair. Yeah. Because sometimes that is an identity grounding thing for some people. What language they speak. For me, it's not. It's like the opposite, because I speak two languages fluently and other languages not fluently, and it is in fact a thing that scatters me, because I don't feel I'm not like 100% in any of. Like I always feel like, oh, but I'm leaving part of myself out because I'm not using that language, like right this second. Shelley, we left you out. Let's go.
Well, when I first learned about this theme, I was definitely thinking about my main protagonist, and who, just literally redefines herself in an emergency, to get work in the Depression. But, she radically redefines herself. She becomes a male, and then discovers that she's not just in hiding, that she can do things differently and more successfully and access parts of herself that she really couldn't in 1937 as a woman. And in fact, it was so funny, thinking about Sarah's book with these different selves. I even have her dead twin speaks to her in her head, always goading her on to do things. He lives in her head, and he thinks her body is his way to go about the world and get to do the adventures he wants to do. And so she's always fighting between competing instincts about what she thinks it is right to do. But then, as I mentioned, the events of the past, season for me just got me thinking about not just my protagonist, but for me, really. I married fairly young, and I had children, and I was always a mom. And I taught 34 years, mainly at Sacramento State University, just down the street, taught writing, and then coached writers. And, it was always a very nurturing role. Mommy, teacher. And I think my personality started changing. I think I was a little bitchier before all this happened. And so I realized that there was a little something hidden in all of my nurturing behavior over these many decades. And so my husband had a heart failure when he was scuba diving with our kids. And after that, he's fine. But at that point, about 10 years ago, this happened. We both decided, dang, if there's something we want to do, we really got to do it. And I did not start writing until then. I started writing 10 years ago because when I was teaching and mothering, I did not find that quiet, that space, that clear desktop to do any writing, or even to picture myself writing. It wasn't until I thought that space had been cleared that I could do it. Now, that was stupid. That's on me. I could have been like all of you. I could have been writing right along, but I just didn't picture it. And I think where the most recent crisis, existential crisis, comes in, it's related to the fact that, my kids are launched. They're awesome. I've got one grandbaby, another on the way. Everything's great. They don't need me for the same kinds of things anymore. And so then I start this writing life, which I am gobbling up. I couldn't love it more than I'm loving it. And then my parents start to decline. And so then it was time to parent my parents. And so there have been, over the past 5 years of parenting my parents while longing to be with my own children and my grandchild and my writing life, that I started to feel like, I want to get out there. I want to do all of these things that I've been waiting so long for, and to feel a little bit of resentment about always needing to come home because I was needed there. And so I'm interested to hear what you're saying about, how long the existential crisis can last, or how many versions of it there are. Because I think this is not unlike.
I think it's interesting that with your parents, when you were parenting your parents, you didn't stop writing. In fact, you're using it in your writing. You're like,
Yeah.
it's deepening your writing. And that's always why, like, why Pen Parentis was kind of founded, was because like all of these experiences deepen and thicken your writing. And like, even out there, there's one of Sarah's students just said that she watched her own mother go through something very similar with her own parents. So it's resonating with her. And so, I mean, I think that, yeah, all these life cycles and all the caregiving that we do over the years, whether it's to ourselves because something terrible happened and we have to take care of ourselves, like, but the writing can also kind of give you a center.
Yeah,
While
I mean,
you're,
I think Milda's right. I mean, I remember when I had my first son, and I didn't know about Pen Parentis, right? So like we hadn't really come around yet, and
now
boy,
she does.
was that hard and lonely. It was like the kid was a tough kid, and I did not talk about not picturing myself writing. Like that was the last thing on my mind. But the thing is like with community and people to look up to, like all these authors, you know, you can do it. You know, you can find a way. You can connect with other people who are trying to do the same thing you're doing, who have succeeded. And look at them. They're pretty incredible. And you can do that too. I mean, I think Pen Parentis is really there for you guys.
I'm interested in just going to change, not really change the subject. Just, I want to go back to the writing of the self, writing, like when you're writing of, because you know everybody's sort of writing very, very personal things. When you're writing yourself, how does that help? Does it help you define yourself to write it? Like what does writing do, I guess, to help with this kind of existential crisis? Like what does writing give us that, you know, baking a cake doesn't, you know, or cleaning your house?
Wiley?
That is so deep.
I do.
I was like, yeah, existential crisis, I'm in. Let's go.
Yes, I think it's trying to name the thing, you know, like what is a void, right? Like it's like trying to name the thing that is not quite like it's deep within, but it's also not substantial. Like it's not something you can vacuum up and like suck up and take out to the trash can, right? So it's like something that just kind of swirls and resides within us. And I think it's so necessary to try and express that, or to coalesce those kind of ephemeral things into words so that we can understand. I think that's the only way our brains can really process in some kind of a more intellectual way, so that it's not just all emotion. Because I think the emotion can drown us sometimes and pull us down. So I am very grateful for words. I'm extremely jealous of poets and musicians who can sort of just, you know, get it out, I think, quicker in some ways than prose writers.
Let's hear from poet Lisa. What do you think of this concept of naming things and putting it on paper?
Yeah, so like this, I was just thinking when you asked the question about writing yourself and what does it give us, and I was just reading, I don't know if you're familiar with Jenny Hagen Wills. She's a Korean Canadian adoptee, and she's put out some amazing books, but she's just put out a book of essays, and she talks about what there is, like she's basically giving a warning, like be careful what you want to know, be careful what you want to uncover. Ooh. And I think that's actually an interesting piece of advice from a writer, because this is what memoir is doing, is you're really, really like in depth critically analyzing and unpacking and taking apart and really, really looking at these different aspects of, you know, your story or your parents' story or whatever it is. And she's kind of being a little bit cautionary about it based on her own experiences and based on, you know, what she has gone out believing that she is entitled to and needs to know every answer about everything. And then, you know, coming to this sort of place of maybe, like you can't unring a bell, right? Like maybe I didn't need to do that. And it's very
Has anybody,
interesting.
have any of you come across anything like that where you're like, oh, I wish I would like to put that genie back? No?
Well, I wouldn't say I've done that dangerous thing that you're describing, but I will say I'm aware, maybe it's just a function of my natural self-doubt. But I notice that when I'm writing and accessing personal experience, even in fiction, I feel like I'm excavating. I am excavating my own history and my reactions, things that have happened to me. And so it's a dusting off. What will I discover? So it's a really gratifying experience for me to reveal something I did not know before about myself. And yet, sometimes when I get to writing and I really am loving these sentences, and then I start to think, but is that true? Or am I just going with it? You know what I mean? Like when I start writing, sometimes that takes over and I walk away thinking that's the truth and then wondering later, but if I'd been in a slightly different mood when I wrote that, would that have been the truth that was revealed in that session? So it's weird. The writing gives me this great confidence about sort of mastering my own history. And then this self-doubt, did I really?
That's interesting. Wiley, do you have anything to say about this?
I too find that.
I feel like we should all be in pajamas, like with our glasses of wine. Like,
yeah.
I think definitely. I think to what Lisa was saying and Shelley as well, this idea of like personal, like, because you know your story pretty well, you think, and then you go and interrogate it, and then it's like, you know, it shifts. The truth is there, but it like the aspect or a certain light hits it differently with different ways of telling it, or like how much emphasis you place on one aspect or another. So I think it's a little bit kaleidoscopic and it's unnerving, and it can be. I had to take a big break after finishing my manuscript because I found that I was quite drained. And then I feel like I might not have, like, I have to go back and edit. And now I feel like I might have a different version of things. And I feel like there are so many different versions of ourselves that we wish to bring to the page, and they don't always fit, right? Like from mood to mood, from day to day, sometimes they're like subtle shifts. And actually a great writer, another shout out to, Canadian author Kevin Chong said,
Kevin,
we know
we had him on our show. We love Kevin.
Yes, he's great. And he's a teacher as well. And he recently said to me, be careful, Wiley, like you want to finish it quickly because your book can get away from you. Which I think is brilliant. And that's actually quite stayed with me, because I think when I revisit older chapters of what I've written, I feel like, oh, I've kind of, we're always constantly changing and evolving, and our perspectives shift, right? And so when you reread old material, you're like, oh, either you can do better, or I don't see things quite that way anymore. And so it's it's very slippery work.
Yeah. Sarah, did you have any of this issue when you were editing? Did you have some of that where you're like, I needed everything is?
I mean, a couple, like, because some of it, even though it's fictionalized, there are certain sentiments that are present in like my children and my husband, and like those are characters within the book as well, like having family members around. So a little bit of editing, but mostly I think what the creation of like writing, and in particular, like I'm a weird weirder poet, I guess, just because I tend to make these like fictional characters or like do these persona kind of poems that allow me to project and like put my thoughts or emotions into a character, and I can pretend for a little bit like, oh, that's not me. Like my first book had this whole kind of fable with the sow, like this pig, shape-shifting pig, that would go into like female a young human form. And it was like at first I was just trying to get back to writing again, and it was after I had had my first child, and I was like, I just need to start writing again. I'm going to give myself an assignment, and it's going to be anybody but me, because I've been trying to write some confessional poems and I can't get anything out, and it's all crap. And then I started on the character, and I was able to say like, and then I started writing these poems. I'm like, oh, I'm still talking about me.
Hello.
It
Right?
gave you a little distance.
Yeah, but there's that distance, the objective distance. So that's also happening in the familiar. I have these characters, but I mean, they're both me. And then there's like this third character, which is the me that's observing the two characters that are fighting. I mean, it's really psychologically, I'm probably certifiable. I mean, it's locked away. But there's like, it's this, it allows that distance where you look at the things that you're doing. And for the process of creation, you can say like, okay, that's not me. That's separate, right? For the editing, you can say, okay, that's not me, that's separate. But then like after some time, you look back and you're like, oh, that's me.
Yeah.
That's
Lisa,
did
did you
with
find
novel writing too?
Yeah,
right. Like, oftentimes you create a character and you're like, oh, this is like Lisa or whoever, right? But it's you. There's a part of you in there, maybe not all of you, but one of yourselves, right?
Yeah.
I want to shout out anybody who's in the audience who wants to ask a question. You have about 5 minutes to get it together and write it down, because otherwise we're going to go without talking to you. So just if you have a question, do it. Like ask a question. So in the meantime, so go ahead.
So Sarah, you touched on your family members being characters in your work. They're older now, right? So how do they feel about that?
Well, it's funny. Like my eldest daughter, she said she can't read the first book. Like it just feels too close to her. She started reading some of them and she's like, nope, putting it down. And I was like, that's cool. That's fine. And I know my husband came to like my book launch and was hearing some of these poems for the first time and was like, oh. and like one of them, like I set in like a Buffalo Wild Wings in like JFK. And he was like, oh, I remember that. Like I feel like it is a little bit weird, but what helps maybe is just that the focus is on like all of like, it's a solipsistic kind of focus. It's like all on me. So really it really is like when it addresses like those other characters, like the children and the husband, they're like people who are kind of watching and being mystified by what's going on with these two characters. And then also like they're affected by it, and the selves are like feeling sorrow about that. Like, so there's a little bit of a mea culpa in the writing of it.
We have a question from the audience. What about exploring a character who made the opposite choice that you did? Do any of you resonate with that question? Exploring, did any of you have to write characters that made different choices than what you would normally have done?
I feel like that's all of our moms. See, you're all laughing. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes. That's too funny. And now we sit in our personal. That's kind of.
Let's contemplate that.
Pretty interesting.
Well, I will say that when I first started writing this trilogy, one of the things that got me going was I was picturing someone who would be like, in the year 2000, she would be like this iconic crone of a gossip columnist in a big city. She'd be like, we would all want to have dinner with her, and she would say the bad things, And I asked myself, how would she get there? How did she become that if she was born in 1920?
Right.
And so I started writing these books in order to find out where would a woman like that begin. And she wasn't really getting into a stable marriage, and she wasn't really raising a bunch of kids. To get to that, she couldn't lead a life like I live. So I guess that's a little bit true. And maybe this was like a little fun exploration.
Well, what made it possible was the fact that she made like she was a man.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a very famous Chinese story, Woman Warrior. This woman goes off to war instead of the father, right? And she becomes this great warrior. Mm-hmm. And who would have thought? No, if they had known, she never would have, been this general or whatever. But she became general. And then at the end, it's such a letdown. Like she ends up, falling in love with another general or whatever. And it's like, no, she's definitely not going to be happy with that, because like she's going to have to be like mom. You know what I mean? But it never talks about that.
Fantasy story, really, right? That one.
Disney calls that movie Mulan.
Yeah, Mulan, right. Right.
Maybe if I can just interject, like one of the things that I think has been really surprising is like my own partnership. Like my husband didn't put too many like gender, roles like on me or something, like, and
didn't have gender.
There's still that natural way that like we either have like expected things to act a certain way, or like, just like the child itself. Like I have our youngest like was attached to my arm her entire, like the first, year of her life. She just sat on like this arm and didn't want to go to anybody else, and like, so what do you do? Like she wanted nobody. So like, what do you do when that happens? Like that's not society telling you, that's like your own flesh and blood telling you like, do this thing. And
you're like, no, the book says.
You need to sleep by yourself. Yeah, it's so I think like we can also impose those things on ourselves, like culturally, like you can say like, oh, I want to be the general, but also I want to be the mom. But like those things are not, the roles don't work with each other. And it's not necessarily even because of what society's saying. It's just because like that's the thing that is, like that's the way these two things work, and they can't cohabitate.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing about mortality, right? We all only have so much time, and you can't do every single thing in the entire universe. You just can't. Despite the fact that middle-aged men think that they can, you can't. You cannot do all the things. Like
I wanted to do all the things.
I know.
I was so angry when I found out I couldn't do all the things.
That's what I'm saying. Like mortality is not.
You can do all the things, but you can do them badly is the problem. You can do a lot badly.
Sometimes you don't get to do the things that you
sometimes you don't get to do the things either, like, and that is, I think that is part of an existential crisis too, is just like realizing the limits of biology and realizing the limits of like circumstance and money and job and time, like the limits of time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, no, but that's it. I mean, that's a thing, right? That our existence is a mortal existence. We have however much time we have, and that's it. And so what you do with it is what you can do with it. And a lot of times there are external things that stop. Well, like your baby is like on your arm and won't go off. You can be a bad mom and shake her off, but it's probably not wise. Like, and so you yourself are like, fine, then I will. But
I also think that some roles are, I mean, it used to be you'd intern to be like an acupuncturist or a shoemaker or whatever, right?
Now you just watch YouTube.
Now it's like, study, and it's so different in nature than how, different cultures dealt with these kinds of things in the past. So it makes it more difficult to be able to do different things. I'm wondering if they could speak, they'd probably say, no, that's bullshit. I imagine, yeah, a shoemaker would not have the opportunity to be a doctor or anything like that. So
I mean, back, depends
how far back,
right? So how far back and where you were born,
unless had a sauce,
geographically where you were born and what class. Oh yeah. Lisa, you're being very, very quiet. We want to hear from you. Say something profound.
Well, I'm enjoying listening to all of you and hearing you laugh. Yeah, just really good conversation. I like the idea of, the question about the different, writing a character that would make different choices than you. And I feel like that is what fiction is actually about. So there's a launching off point that comes out of your experience or your interests or your whatever, but then it's like it's all the spin-offs from that. It's all the what ifs. Like fiction isn't autobiography, right? So there's lots of.
Well, it depends on what MFA program you're at.
Zing.
But no, Lisa, that's a very good point. And that is so true, that fiction is where you get to just be anything and look at it from all the points of view and all the things. You guys, we went through this hour like butter. Like it was so fast. Like I can't believe that this is like, it's way over an hour. And I'm sorry that all you people had to, sit for this long, but it was awesome. I had a great time. What's March?
Before we go on,
Yes.
next month, we on March 11th, we have From Page to Screen. So all of you who wonder, how the heck do they do that? Like, how do they get their book into like a film that we all get to see, or on Netflix, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it seems like unreachable, but these people have done it. We're going to have Stuart Lewis, Helen Wan, and Trey Ellis. So join us then.
It's going to be amazing. And because this is the Existential Salon, I will leave you with a palliative, a sentence that you can put up on your bulletin board when you are feeling depressed. And that is, no one else is you. So you see the koan of the day. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. And we love you. And please donate to our nonprofit because we need your money. And also have a good day and write lots and lots of stuff and come back next month. We love you.